Hello and welcome to Art in the Digital World. I'm your host, Brandon, and this is a new series that we're doing where we're going to be talking to various artists who use different tools, different digital and computer type tools to create their art. And this week we have Kwei Yu Chu. He's a 3D animator and teacher and an artist in general. So welcome again to our second show.
It's good to be here.
Last show we showed your thesis project, and we talked a lot about sort of maybe your beginnings and how you do it, and talked a lot about story. But now you said that you are a teacher, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
And so teaching was pretty much my first kind of real professional, quote-unquote, animation job. I really enjoy teaching because I think, animation is a language, or it's a medium of expression. And so, for me, as an artist, I love to use that to convey my own ideas. But I really like the notion of teaching others this language. I really think that the more people that know animation, the better the world will be, because we'll get more ideas out there. And it's partially my way of giving back, because I just love the medium and it really inspires me. And so I think that that other people should be able to feel that as well.
And how long have you been teaching?
It's been about, I would say, a little over 5 years now. So it's been a while. And starting out, it was very interesting because part of it's like you're not quite sure what you're doing, but it actually worked out. Like I could fall back on the process that I went through in learning 3D and understanding how complex and difficult it is at times, all the frustration and pulling your hair out while you're learning it. It's something that makes me a little bit more able to empathize with my students. And so a lot of the time when I first started out, I was self-teaching myself a lot of these concepts. And so for me, I would fall back and use some of the knowledge that I gained to give my students shortcuts. So this is, I know what you're going through, but this is what you need to do to solve that problem. So having my own experiences to fall back on really helped me get through those first years. But the program actually evolves too. So, when you get feedback from the students, when the program itself starts to come out with new versions and new features, then your content also needs to evolve with that.
And what is it that you're teaching? What classes or which programs are you teaching the students?
So I'm part of, a whole computer graphics department, but the classes that I teach specifically are focused on 3D animation. So we use a program called Autodesk Maya. There are a lot of different programs out there, but we decided, the department head and I decided that Maya is pretty much the best option when you're trying to cover all different fields, from potential film and TV and games to even things like scientific visualization or architectural images. And
what have you gotten out of it? What have you learned as a teacher? I mean, has it helped you as being an artist and what you develop or what you have developed for your style?
Well, one thing about teaching, and this is pretty much like, you're not really going to know it until you actually do it, like know it for sure. It's that it forces you to know the content so much more than you would if you're just approaching it as an artist, because you're not only just using the medium now, you're actually having to explain it to your students, and you're having to answer their questions, and some students come up with the strangest questions at times. So it can be really, really challenging, but it actually has helped me understand the medium a lot more than I would have otherwise. And so in that regards, I have a personal gain from it. But in another regard, you're also helping somebody else as far as trying to understand the medium too.
How far back did you think that maybe you wanted to be a teacher? Or was it something that you kind of always knew you might want to do? Or was it something that was like, I need a job, I'm going to go teach?
Well, I never really previously had envisioned myself teaching this, but there's certain things that I think that you're almost just naturally suited to do. I think not everybody can become a teacher for sure. it requires on one hand, knowing the medium or knowing the content that you're teaching, but something that a lot of people overlook is just the ability to communicate that content, to really convey ideas in a clear and easy to understand way. And so, when I first started teaching, it was almost like, an opportunity that came up, and I felt I was a little bit hesitant because I wasn't sure that I would be able to do it. But after those first couple classes, you're like, hey, this is pretty comfortable. This works. But teaching is so hard to do. I mean, for me, I just think it's very challenging because you're going up there. First of all, teaching Maya or Autodesk Maya is very complex already. So just having the security or comfort level to be able to show people, live, working with this program, but also just like, psyching yourself up, going in front of the class each time for lecture. It's like a performance in itself. So, and also just the exorbitant amount of hours just preparing your lectures and the homework and things. There's so much to it, but in the end, when your students have that moment where they get it, and it's like they're starting to use the program on their own accord. It's very gratifying, and so that's kind of the reward for all of that you put into it. So,
What about the curriculum? Are you kind of following a specific curriculum the school said, or do you get to kind of give your own influence? Or I imagine it's probably a combination of both.
Well, when I first came in, it was, when the program decided that they wanted to shift to Maya as their main 3D animation program, and so there wasn't really any real prior existing content pertaining to this particular program. So a lot of it I had to put together myself. So part of me fell back on my master's studies at UCLA, which inspire each student to become his or her own individual artist. And so I wanted to take a generalist approach, meaning that basically the student understands the whole production pipeline from beginning to end. And so I kind of took things, like in 3D, it's not just about you could go here, 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 here. When you're really learning it, it's pretty sequential. Like, so you're learning to model things or create shapes and customize those shapes. Then you're really learning to, like if you want to go into more advanced animation, you create a structure, like a skeleton for those shapes to be able to move around. And then you do the animation, and then you could tweak the textures or the look of your characters, and you render it out after you do lighting and things. And so everything kind of builds on one concept after another. And so that's kind of how I approach the class. It makes sense, and in the end, even after the first semester, students should be able to make a short film.
And what about, I know for my school that I went to, they had some sort of goals that the students would go to, or where they were working towards for going to that specific school. What do you think that where do you think the students can go once they take your courses or the courses at MJC?
Well, so I basically have 2 semesters to teach all that I can about animation, and that's definitely not enough. Like, I would love to be able to have, specific sections dedicated to modeling or a whole semester just on animation. But for us, it's kind of like this whirlwind experience where I'm picking out things. I have to really choose the core things that I think are important to know. But by the end, the students do cover a lot of ground, and I think that they can ultimately make independent productions if they wanted to pursue that, and I think that would be awesome. I'm all for the independent artist and trying to get your own work out there. Finding a job with animation skills is very tricky at this time because a lot of the market is saturated. People want to go to Pixar, DreamWorks, or just going to make the latest Call of Duty game or something like that. So, but those markets are actually very, very hard to get into, especially right out of school. Ours is a 2-year program, so people can opt to go to a 4-year computer graphics program if they want to. But even then, you kind of have to plan ahead, and a lot of the skills that really are required to get a job, we can't teach everything in lecture or in a class environment. Like we could get you started in the right direction, but a lot of it's about spending those hours on your own and really learning the program to the point where you're fluent in it. So I think like when it comes to finding a job, your instructors are very important in getting you the right sensibility, the right mindset, but most of it's really, going through the process yourself and getting to know it and be comfortable with it on your own.
Well, you touched a little bit on it, but maybe what kind of advice maybe would you give to the students, or what kind of thing would you say to them to prepare them to really go into it, whether it be going to a school or a job, an independent thing, or trying to even go into those big studios like games and movies and stuff like that?
Well, there's a lot of things that are involved, especially depending on the industry you're going into. In the big companies in the studios, they really focus a lot on specialization. So they just want people who can do one thing really, really well. And all these people are just like cogs that fit into this bigger machine. I don't necessarily think that approach facilitates good art because, you have this one skill, but can you make a film? Can you create your own work and put it out there? So that's why I personally prefer, and I personally am a generalist. Like I like that approach, just because you know the process, you know what different steps there are, so you can actually kind of tie everything together. You have an overall perspective of things as opposed to just this one little corner of the project. So if you want to go to those big companies, you pretty much need to tailor your specialty to what you want to do. And some people might not like that, but it's kind of a reality to that area of the industry. Now, for instance, if you're going to, there are other areas that animation can apply to, like for instance, what I work in, which is scientific visualization. Now, it's nice because in my department, the artist is actually given complete control over the whole production process. So I talk with scientists, they give me their concept, and I could do everything from storyboarding to modeling to animating and create the whole film by myself. So there are studios out there that will let you be a generalist and be a complete artist, but it just depends on what your own sensibility is. If I knew some students, their main goal in life was just to work for Disney, and that probably didn't work out because things are different from what you perceive in the end. But that was their initial goal, and it's kind of like, if that's your sensibility, then you want to tailor your skills to fit that environment. But be aware of what's out there and how those companies work first before you design what you learn.
I think for a lot of us, when we go to school or pursue this field, we sort of have this idea in the beginning. We want to go. I know for me, I wanted to go and be a director in Hollywood. And as I've gone more and more into it, I've realized that there's so much more, and there's so much more that can be very fulfilling. Because if you go and work for Pixar, yeah, that's really wonderful, but you are just going to be a cog, and you may stay being a cog for a really long time. Right. Whereas if you do something that maybe isn't as big, but you get a lot more control. Maybe talk a little bit more about how you came to get that job, or how you came to go seek that out or find that
Sure.
kind of opportunity.
Well, the thing is, like, opportunities everywhere, right? Mostly like where you least expect it at times, right? So for me, it could be just like almost like a random thing, but this actually stresses the importance of networking, especially in this type of field, a creative field. Who can literally make a difference as far as what's your next gig, what's your next job. So for me, getting this job at Livermore was, kind of a matter of, I had been taking a class at JC along with teaching, but I wanted to kind of like learn a little bit more about computer programming. So I was taking a computer science class, and I would sit in the same spot every lecture. And this other gentleman who actually worked at Lawrence Livermore Lab sat in the spot next to me every lecture. So we just started talking, and basically he just told me one day, you should apply, you'd get a job there. And it's like, it just so happens that, at that time, I checked on the website, and that specific department that I work for now was looking for an animator at that particular time, which it had been years since there were any like real hirings in that department. So it was just like one of those weird things that, that the opportunity arose, and, if you're ready for those opportunities when they come up, then, also, part of it's also just opening your mind, because I just really think that there's connections out there, and you just have to be sensitive to them. And if you're ready and you project a certain vibe or approach, then you'll find something. It's just, finding that first job is really, really hard. That's probably the hardest job you'll get, or you'll try to find. But that leads to another thing. You get experience, you build your skills. You might move to another job and just build and build and build. But it's a gradual process, as is animation in general. You really need to just take things one step at a time.
Can you talk a little bit about what you do, as much as you can talk about,
Sure.
at Livermore Labs, and
Sure.
sort of what your role is in their sort of scientific discovery?
Sure. So again, animation is a medium of communication, and when it comes to science, like scientists have their own language, and they talk to each other, and a lot of the time it's really dense, talking about formulas, the way they do things, a lot of scientific jargon. And sometimes it's really hard for somebody from the general public, or even politicians who don't have a scientific background, to understand what that means or what's going on. Now, instead of seeing like a PowerPoint presentation that's just like a bunch of view graphs and numbers and stuff, if you transform that into an animation that's actually visually showing you what's going on behind the scenes, in a temporal way, people are drawn to that. People can understand that a lot better. So I get to work with a bunch of different scientists, and they come to me, and we try to figure out what's the best way to convey their concept. So in a sense, I'm kind of like, using this language to convey their content. And it's very interesting and fulfilling in that, a lot of the things that I work on, you realize, wow, if this works, or if this, fulfills its promise, then it can be life-changing, like make the world a better place or a safer place and things like that. So, working in a scientific field has its own merit as well. Like, you're not necessarily going to work in animating somebody's story about furry animals and stuff. And not that that's bad, but you're really working with concepts and real science that it's pretty interesting, and definitely something that can improve things for everyone.
What kind of new tools or new techniques do you think are in the pipeline to come down for 3D? I know for one thing, 3D, as in stereoscopic 3D, is becoming a really big thing. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, or maybe some other things that might be happening in the future with computer graphics?
Sure. Well, most everything that's coming out in animation nowadays, as far as the film industry, is going to have a stereo 3D version. And for me, I think it's a little bit too overblown right now. Originally, I was totally not sold on the idea, but then I saw Avatar, and I loved Avatar, by the way, but just because it was fresh and it created a real experience, as opposed to just watching a film. You really felt something different. It was, and that I think I attribute a lot to James Cameron just having impeccable timing, as far as even with Titanic, just having the right movie at the right moment in time, and just getting everything perfect as far as meeting what people wanted to see. Now, after Avatar, though, it's not like I want to see everything in stereo 3D. I think it's one of those things that, for every once in a while, for a specific film, it's perfect. It enhances the film, and that's where I think it's important to guide technology in a way that's going to enhance. Again, we come back to the notion of story. If it's not doing anything for the story, then why do you need it to be in 3D, right? So I don't necessarily think everything needs to be in 3D, and part of it's also because, one, there's the notion of having to put something on to enjoy it, which is kind of a little bit of an annoyance, but you could get over that. But also, from a director's standpoint, a lot of people become nauseous or disoriented when they put on the 3D glasses. So you're already cutting out a certain percentage of people, and there are people who who also might have a limited sight in one eye, so they don't actually get anything out of the 3D experience either. And so it's a fairly high percentage, just if I can recall, and you're just cutting out a lot of people right from the bat if you're just focusing on that one feature. So Stereo 3D is interesting. I know I've seen some amazing things in it, and I think it has a place. I don't really think it should be everywhere, though. So when it comes to technology and what I think is very interesting to me, though, I like the notion that the internet is finally coming into its own as a delivery medium for digital video and content like that, because this was way back in the 90s. People were talking about, oh, the internet's the next big thing and all this stuff, but I think it's only up until these last few years that it's really become a medium, where people really look to it to watch content and video and things like that. So that's exciting as a director or a filmmaker, because the whole distribution layer that was in between, that was preventing people from, being able to put out their work, is gone. Like, you could literally just throw something up there and have millions of people watch it instantly. So that's, I think, very exciting. And if the medium becomes, the internet itself becomes to the point where, we could have, super smooth, super easy, like a free-form way for people to put out their stuff, I just think that would be almost like an ideal from the point of like an artist's standpoint. So we'll see how that works.
Well, it does seem like it is going that way, and it is becoming easier and easier for people to access things from their iPhone and their computer, and where they can have those things be as a central hub for their stuff.
Yeah.
Do you think that there is a market for this stereoscopic 3D in some of the science field, or maybe like you mentioned architecture, because I can see how being able to visualize those things in a more definition might help.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, it's funny you should mention that, because I had just worked on a stereo 3D animation. One of the things we have at Livermore is something called the National Ignition Facility, which is like the world's largest laser. But we created a video where, it has this dramatic entrance where you're flying through space and everything, and that's in 3D. And I did that intro, and it does make a huge difference in the end, as far as, if you're at a conference and people can see it in 3D, it's like this spectacle. And sometimes to get people engaged in things, you need that spectacle or that spectacular aspect of it. It's a big draw at the movie theaters, no doubt about it. And that's something that you should be aware of, and you should also take advantage of as a director. You know that there's that powerful part of this visual draw for people. But, it helps you immerse yourself into an environment. And if you use Stereo 3D correctly, as opposed to having stuff fly at you all the time, but really using that depth to convey a notion of space or drawing people into that space, then it can be a very powerful tool.
Now, we talked about the advantages and disadvantages of it. In your opinion, and I'm sure you've been asked this before, do you think 3D is here to stay, or do you think that it's going to go away like the red and blue 3D is, and maybe there will be holograms or something like that? Or do you think it really is going to be a permanent part of this sort of digital filmmaking?
I think that 3D is probably going to be here a long time, especially in the animated field, because it's actually very easy to create 3D things in animation, because in live action you're involving like real physical cameras and double the prints and the costs and things. But in animation, you could very easily set up a Stereo 3D rig with 2 cameras in virtual space, and you're just rendering. I mean, rendering costs money too, but it's actually relatively easy. So I think a lot of animated productions are just ramped up to automatically have a 3D version or Stereo 3D version to begin with. I think it's here to stay, but ultimately, I'm hoping that maybe they'll come up with something as far-fetched as like holograms, where you actually see, like in Star Wars, where you're seeing like people in real space, and everybody sitting in the theater can have a different view of the same action. That would be pretty interesting. I just don't like the notion that you have to wear those glasses for it to work. And there's something somewhat disturbing about how you're tricking your eye to begin with, because it's just taking that spatial relationship that people have between their two eyes and just faking it. And I just don't like that. Like with the Nintendo 3DS that's coming out, they say that little kids should not play with that because it's going to mess up their eye development. And, that says something to me that if it's going to toy a little bit with your, physiology, then it's probably not necessarily the best thing to do on a regular basis, I would say.
Well, we don't have a lot of time left, but can you just tell me a little bit about some of the other things that you maybe do or some of the other things you might be doing in the future with your art? What do you see next to where a 3D animator at your stage might be going to?
And so my primary work, in the scientific field, it's very engaging and very intriguing, and I'm looking forward to how that evolves down the line. But it's a little bit, straying a little bit from my original love, which is the notion of storytelling. And I have a lot of stories that I want to tell. It's just a matter of managing time enough to the point where I can. But I'm very excited with the evolution of content delivery media like the internet and things like that, and smartphones, and I just think, wow, the next step here is going to be very interesting to see what happens, where people can literally have instant access to content, and I'm thinking about working on certain projects that can be delivered through that type of a medium, and it's those ideas that I've been, again, toying around with in my mind that are kind of just ready to come out. So I'd really like to just, dive back into the narrative realm and eventually, create some new products as far as characters and worlds for people to visit and enjoy.
Do you see yourself more into, you're saying you see yourself more going into the story aspect as opposed to the scientific aspect?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So
that's great. Yeah, it's really interesting, the Nintendo 3DS, and there's some tablets coming out that are going to be 3D. So it's a very interesting technology, and I think it's a step in the right direction. But I agree, it's limiting, and it does seem like it might be there's going to be something else. There's going to be something, the next big thing,
right,
that will be like holograms or whatever,
right, and it'll be like, oh, I don't have to wear my glasses for that, something like that, and it'll really catch on.
And it will be something that nobody will all be blown away by.
Right.
Just like even the 3D was it's pretty amazing, but now it's like, well, what's the next thing?
Right, but in the end, like, hopefully people will again use the content as the way to guide the technology.
Right.
So it enhances the story, it enhances the message or the ideas.
Great.
So.
Well, thank you very much again for joining us. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise.
And thank you for joining us on TV. And until next time, we'll hopefully have another digital artist who can talk to us about their profession. Have a great day.